And that is, like I said, that's going to be a perfect segue to Silence and Light, which is a rock band made up solely of former veterans. And you are a founding member. You're one of, it was you and one other person, correct? Jason Everman are the
Yes.
two guys that founded it. Let me throw you out the first question. Let's assume I'm an alien. I just dropped to Earth. I don't know anything about rock music. I don't know anything about music in general. And I meet you. What are you going to tell me who's completely ignorant of everything music related? What is Silence and Light?
Man, talk about putting the pressure on me here. In a nutshell, it's a band. The intent was never for us to be all veterans, but it was, Jason and I starting to write and collaborate and put together music. Jason was in both Nirvana and Soundgarden prior to joining the Army in 1994. He joined the Army because of the things that he saw that happened in Mogadishu, interestingly enough. So he's in Nirvana and Soundgarden. We put out music, we take our music royalties and we give those to charitable organizations that help the units from where we came from, where we served. So that's our mission. That's what we're trying to do. And if you buy an album, we're taking 100% of the royalty that we get from that. There's some attrition that happens along the way from different people that take their portion, but we contribute 100% of that to charitable organizations that help guys and gals that are serving in those units.
That's a great way to have a band, not just have a band, but help other people through your music, both from a money standpoint and because your music can help people. Like you listen to Ozzy Osbourne when you were getting it on, obviously. Now you have Silence and Light. Now you have one album out, there's a second on the way. What were some changes you really wanted, or what are things you want to do differently from album one that were a priority to switch it up for album two?
I think, anything artistic, creative, it could be a military operation, but rarely do things go the way you want them to go exactly. And like anything, it's the ability to kind of, okay, adapt to things that happen. The first album, I try and explain this to people, but we got offered by literally one of the biggest producers in the music business. He's a veteran also, a guy named Josh Goodwin, Gudwin. He's Bieber's producer, Celine, like literally people that I don't know because I don't follow that genre of music, but Bad Bunny, Dua Lipa, like these people, you check them out. Like,
Stars, yeah,
who's this
major
person?
stars.
Who's this person? And it's like 220 million follower type of people. So anyway, he's their producer. He reached out and said, hey, I want to help. I want to produce the album. And was like, well, let me see who this guy is. And that's how I kind of found out. I totally lied to the guy and said, we're ready to go because of his schedule. He only had certain dates free. And I was like, oh yeah, we'll be ready by January. When I rogered up to recording this thing in January was maybe end of September. We didn't even have a singer. So we like literally limped this thing across the finish line. And I'm proud of it. I'm proud that we got it done more than anything. Like everybody talks about, I could write a book or I could do this or I could do that. Another thing to actually do it. The second part of it was like standing up a business and this thing makes money and we sell merchandise and what do we do? Like how does that all happen? You're your own boss. So, album cover art and where does that come from and what do we want the font to be for this thing, like it turns into everything. So it's a huge undertaking. It's not just, hey, a couple of dudes getting together in somebody's basement playing a few tunes and then recording it. There's a huge piece to it. Social media piece is another part of it. I mean, that could be a full-time job for just about anybody if they wanted it to be unpaid, but that's that's one of those things. So anyway, that's kind of what it is. The second album, we had the benefit of COVID. We had the benefit of being able to do a lot of writing, and so the music is way more mature, and all the pieces and parts that should be there are there, and all the things that we needed to capture in the studio got captured. We didn't have the time or luxury to get all that stuff done the first go around, so it was literally like we limped 12 songs across the finish line on album one. Of that, 4 of them we couldn't get all the way completed because of time constraints and other things. And this album, 13 tunes, They're all really solid. Like any one of these songs is just standalone, amazing. And we're all our own, worst critic. And if I like something and the other dudes in the band, they're all music critics too. This is something that we all like, and we all kind of grew up with the same stuff, whether it was grunge or Sabbath or whatever. We all take a little bit of who we are and we put it into the music, and it's taken its own life. So I get a lot of compliments from people that are like, dude, nobody's doing stuff like this. And I'm like, well, there's some people probably doing stuff like that still, but there's definitely a throwback kind of vibe to it. And it is very grunge, 90s grunge, but it's a very modern sound. And most of what we talk about, like I've always been very particular about, there's Van Halen rock and party, good time, we're riding around in limos, doing all this, whatever behavior. And then there are bands like Alice in Chains, which is like, these aren't happy songs. They're not downers necessarily, but it's deeper than just, the party rock song. And we would fall definitely more on the Alice in Chains, Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots kind of vibe, probably more so because it just sounds deeper. It sounds more serious,
Well, let me ask you this. For you personally, not the band as a whole, but for you personally, Brad Thomas, what is the most satisfying thing when it comes to music? Like, if you do this on a day or at a concert, you can go to bed knowing, hey, that is what made me happy to be here. Is there one thing that really stands out, or is it a couple things?
Had a lot of people, connect and say, man, I listened to this tune. I was on the treadmill in the gym and I got tears rolling down my face. Like, that's huge. The fact that, why I'm out there and why I'm public doesn't have to do with me wanting to be a rock star. Like, we're never going to be lucrative enough to be riding around in limos, on our private jet with Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden piloting us from show to show, right? Like, that's not reality. But if I can be an example to other people to say, hey, I figured out a way after serving 20 years and doing some pretty intense stuff and living a lot of dark times and dark days, if I can find out a way that's healthy, positive, and creative to do something as an outlet for some of these feelings and, give me a sense of purpose and giving back to the community. If I can do this, here's my combat resume. If I can do it, anybody can do it. So it really was meant to be an example. I ended up being the guy that just started doing all the media. And initially, the concept was every band member would contribute his portion of the royalties to whatever organization he believed in. And as I started doing more and more media, then it just became more about this one specific organization or these two specific organizations. So anyway, that was kind of the initial concept. And, we might limit it to more organizations. We may grow it to more organizations. We'll see how this next album does. But the first one absolutely killed it. And this, we've got a publicist behind it. So they're going to get it out there all over the place.
And again, for you guys watching at home or listening on Spotify, where of course you can find his music, his band's music, it's Silence and Light. When is the next album dropping? Is there a concrete release date?
Man, good question. Next.
Oh, okay.
No. That was my attempt at some comedy in there. Like everything, right? It's like you have something happen and it kind of makes things adjust. We recorded this album with a guy who's incredibly talented, and we're getting some of the rough mix stuff back now. Not super happy with it. So we're going to kick it to the guy that did the mix on the first album. And if anything, I love the mix on the first album. The only thing I feel like it's lacking is more maturity. Like, the tunes don't have enough pieces and parts for what I intended them to be. Other people hear them and they're like, dude, this is awesome. Like, yeah, because they don't know the way it sounded in my brain when I wrote it. And, that's always the thing with like art. You're trying to get it out there as close to the thing that you have in your mind as possible. This definitely has all the components. It just doesn't sound exactly the way I want it to sound. And it's very hard to go back and forth with someone remotely, even if you're sitting there in the studio, and get things exactly right. So We just hit that delay. Should have it to my homie Johan to do all of the mix. That'll probably take a month. And from there, the publicist needs about 8 weeks with the final music. So she can send it to all the different publications, print, and all of that stuff so that they have time to do print and everything so that times with the release. So initially we were like, we'll have it out in 2022, easy. Everything's recorded, everything's done. And, there's as much work on the back end of recording as there is in the studio itself. So we're just kind of finishing all that stuff up now.
And do you have any upcoming shows? I think you've teased the Rock the Green Beret in Nashville. That's November 13th, I believe.
Yeah.
So we've got that coming up for people who are interested. Do you have any other shows on the books if people wanted to catch Silence and Light in person?
No, we're gonna that's a part of also like promoting an album is getting out there and playing it and playing music and things like that. Our plan for 2022 was rehearse, make sure everything's as tight as it can possibly be, go into the studio, take our time, make sure we get the right mix, we get everything the way we want it to be, and then release it by the end of the year so that in the spring, summer next year, we can get out there and kind of promote it. So if anything, there's just a delay, but I think next year is going to be super busy for us and, plan on being out there a lot more. We're not a band that's going to get in a van and tour up and down the East Coast playing in front of 8 people. Our first show was kind of opening for Lenny Kravitz in DC. And we've had the chance to do a lot of other private shows for charitable organizations and things like that. Some of them are huge. We did one for Third Eye Blind in May. That was a great show. I feel like that's kind of our zone and our niche, is being able to play to some of these kind of private organization, people contributing financially to help, put everything together. So we'll do that. And, the goal would be play some festivals and get onto some festival bills. And that's kind of, I think, where our sweet spot, that's where we want to be.
Well, I'm a huge, huge fan of not just you as a dude, but I love the fact that you're killing it in the music game and you're doing something unique with your band Silence and Light. I got one last question on this, but before I ask that, Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, am I missing anywhere where you also can find Silence and Light?
Amazon, you can Google it and you'll find we're all over the place, but any music platform that you get your music now, we're on that. So if you buy something on iTunes, you are directly contributing more to these organizations that help folks. We're sending everything right now to Warrior's Heart, which is a physical facility in Texas that helps people that are suffering from PTSD, whether it's first responders or special operations people or just whomever it might be, guys and gals. And the thing that I love about that organization, it was started by a former Delta guy, also Tom Spooner, who's a buddy of mine. They do PTSD counseling, but they use art as a form of therapy. And whatever art is to you is what it can be. You could write poetry, you could paint, you could weld, you could sculpt, you could write music, you could, whatever it is. And that absolutely speaks volumes to me. So when I play the guitar, and I'm not a person that's sitting around thinking about 1993 and I wish I had done this differently and I've got all this trauma. I'm not a person my brain doesn't operate that way. But when I pick up a guitar, it's one of the things that I can do where my brain is just in flow state. I'm not thinking about anything, good, bad, or indifferent. It's something. Cooking is another thing that I can do where I'm grilling or making chili or do something else. It's just kind of a zone. And, so I love the fact that they're using art as a form of therapy in some way or another. And that's where we're contributing everything now. So you go out there, if you stream the music, we still get we still get royalties from that. It's not as much as if you buy something. So if you want to support these organizations or Warrior's Heart, more, buy it for $9.99 on iTunes. That's going to send a lot more money there.
And you have some merchandise too.
Yeah,
right?
If people want to help the band, the album doesn't record itself and studio fees aren't free. And I think the first album probably ran to about 35 grand. that, I basically paid for out of my own pocket. So mixing, mastering, all this stuff costs money. And traveling, staying in hotels, rehearsing, all of that stuff, it's not free. So if people want to help support the band, if they buy a t-shirt or merchandise, whatever we've got up on the website right now, I think we're revamping all of the merchandise stuff. The goal is by the time the album hits, we'll have all that stuff kind of refreshed so that it's all available there when the publicist and everybody else is really getting it out there. But if you want to do that and you buy a t-shirt, that's directly kind of helping us offset costs. We're at the point now where we're about breaking even. So, we're not in the hole and we're able to contribute and do all those things. And it's not necessarily us having to go out of our own pocket every time, something comes up. So
Last one on this. Is Silence and Light the most capable action, or is it the most lethal band in the history of music?
probably so. Yeah, I think like I would put our combat resume and time in service up against probably anybody else out there. So, and that was never the intent. It was just really
Right.
kind of, hey, Jason, you were in the music business. I played music before I joined the Army, and let's put something together and do something good with it. And it just kind of grew organically from producer to other bandmates and everybody else it has served. So we're at a point now where all 4 services are represented,
That is
which was never, but literally Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines are represented, and that wasn't the intent. Although there's 2 Army guys, so we still kind of
dominate the space, if you will.